as counselors, will opt out of treating these people because their feelings are just so strong that they can't work with them. If you are one of the counselors or therapists that ends up working with this population, self-care and wellness is so important. It's so important because this is such a dark topic. You have to really, really take care of yourself as a counselor in order to help these individuals as well. A little bit more with working with pedophiles. So both offenders and therapists identified that female therapists had a role in changing offenders' perceptions and attitudes towards women. So since our client is primarily focused on females, only attracted to females, that type of statement could actually help him if he was working with a female therapist. They tend to recognize the impact that counseling sex offenders has on the individual counselor, like I talked about, self-care and wellness. And everyday sex offense counselors face a myriad of job-related stressors, including reading disturbing detailed accounts of sexual abuse, going into jails and prisons to interview offenders, providing expert testimony in what are usually highly contentious court battles, as well as providing face-to-face individual and group therapy with these offenders themselves. So these are just a couple examples of the self-care that I was talking about, the things that we're going to endure as therapists and counselors and why it's so important. Finally, so this is a podcast, and excuse my language, but it's called The Guys We Fucked podcast. It's an anti-slut shaming podcast with two comedians from New York, Christina Hutchinson and Corinne Fisher. They have 603, actually that number is probably significantly higher than that because they boost the numbers every day, subscribers to their podcast. So why am I bringing this to my presentation? So these two comedians have taken female sexuality to a whole nother kind of standpoint, really freeing women. They're tackling a number of serious issues around sex while probing the humor of sex lives, of their own sex lives, with their guests. So, because they're focused on female sexuality, even their guests, they have a lot of male guests, a lot of female guests. The guest that they had on this time was an individual, as you can see, when did you find out that your dad was a pedophile? So I'm going to play a little bit of that podcast just to give you guys an idea of maybe someone outside of Charlie, and what maybe Charlie, but what especially what Troy experienced not only with counselors, but with the justice system, with this family, how it affected all of these people, the deep embedded problems psychologically and how it affected him. And I think once you hear this podcast, you're really gonna start to maybe not change your views on, if you're devout in not working with these individuals or you are, but kind of understand how these people are being treated by society. So I'm going to play that podcast for you now.
Again, the problem is there's not a lot of research on pedophilia, and this is why it's just kind of us sitting around having a conversation, and the only thing we can go off is your personal experience with it. I mean, I'm sure we know other people who have dealt with pedophilia, but there's such a shame connected to it, whether you are someone who has acted on pedophilia, been a victim of it, or just like you, like kind of a victim by association, exactly.
The environment, yeah.
Exactly. So there's such a stigma connected that there's really very little research done. But across the board, it also seems that people can agree that a lot like serial killers, there's a cross-wiring in the brain. They actually see a difference in the brain. They've done a lot of MRIs on pedophiles, and there's like more, I think they white matter in their brain, so it's actually like your brain structure is different. And I talked about this before, like bodies that they exhibit. Did you ever see that?
To it, yeah.
Oh, that was so fascinating. My favorite part, and I talk about this a lot of times, is that they actually sliced open the brain of a serial killer, and they compared it to the brain of a quote-unquote normal person, and it's visibly to me, a very non-scientific person, that it's different in brain structure. Like, is this something that you've thought about? I mean, like, because I know you said, like, it's just weird to me, like, because the first thing I wanted to do was just, like, research everything.
Yeah, I haven't thought too much about that, but when you say it, what it makes me think of is there are probably a lot more Dexters out there.
Oh, God, yes.
Than there are active Dexters. There are non-active Dexters and then active Dexters.
Right.
So the parallel seems to fit. There's something different about their brains. My dad does not understand what he's done, really. He said he's sorry, but he always qualifies it. Yeah, but your mom made me do it,
What?
kind of thing. Yeah,
he defends it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What does he defend? What other excuses does he give?
Oh, let's talk about it. I had a confrontation with him, just sort of like, I got to get this shit off my shoulders and put it on your feet, maybe 10 years ago. And
how old are you now?
I'm 44.
Okay.
Yep. I was roughly 34 when this happened.
Okay.
And I'd been so angry for so long, and I wanted to dump this stuff on him and see if that would be cathartic. So I met, we had this, you've done this and this and this and this, and I was explaining why I was so angry, and he said, I did it, and I'm sorry, but there are circumstances you just don't understand.
So there's never any question that he did it?
Never a question that
Okay.
he's never denied that he did it,
Okay.
but he's never accepted
really
full
defensive
responsibility. His story is he came back from Vietnam. He found out that my mother had been cheating on him.
Is that true?
Doesn't matter.
No,
I don't know.
I'm actually curious if he was blind, though, but I'm just
don't
asking
know.
for the fact, yeah.
I don't know. I'm not going to disparage my mom's reputation. I don't know.
I mean, everybody knows that's not a reason to become a pedophile.
It was wartime.
No, it's not a reason. It's just facts for the story. I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't know. My mother, I've asked my mom, I'm like,
Yeah.
well, did you? I mean, because if you did,
I'm
big
curious
deal.
the
And
level
she
of
said
his
no.
delusion with that. Because if he just made it up, he was so desperate for a defense, but if he,
And the one he talks about is my middle sister. I'm not going to give any names, but my middle sister and him got close because she came to him and said, I saw mommy with another man. So they got closer, and this was his story. These are almost his exact words he told me about, I think, the first time he started this with my middle sister, who was very much the one who got the worst of it by far.
The worst abuse.
Yeah, without question. Nobody, not even my sisters would argue. They'd be like, yeah, she got the worst of it. He said, she started sleeping in the bed with me. We got closer, and then things just happened.
Oh, Jesus.
That sounds like a
damn it.
That sounds like a teenage boy saying with his girlfriend in the back of a VW Bug, things just happen.
So
Doesn't just happen, father-daughter.
Where's your mom at the time when the daughter?
No clue.
Was your mom living in the household?
Yeah. I don't know what.
Okay, because I was going to say.
I'm unclear on those.
Sure.
details.
Is she mad at
That's
herself?
just his story. My mom carries a lot of guilt for maybe not doing more, but she went to the military when she found out because she didn't know what was happening.
Oh, she reported your father to the military.
Well, she tried.
She
and
tried.
they said, you know what, this is going to ruin your husband's career.
Oh, are
And
you
Howard-
fucking kidding me? Well, the military is notorious for covering things up
And it's
for
also
people.
1975 in America. You didn't talk about this at all.
Well, it's 2015 and we barely talk about it, so
Yeah.
this is not
Not much has
surprising.
changed.
And that's why I think it's so important that we're talking about it now.
A military counselor and also I think a school counselor said, how are you going to take care of your family? You should keep this quiet. It's going to ruin your
A
husband's
school
career, tear
counselor
family
at your
apart."
sister's school?
I believe so.
Oh boy.
Holy
Yeah,
fuck.
I know for a fact
that's
a military
disturbing.
counselor.
Military doesn't surprise me. The school is that's
really surprising.
that's
Yeah.
that's
It-
rough.
It's shocking, but
Did
to
they
me,
talk to your sister, your middle sister, who got it the worst? Did anybody say anything
I think,
to her?
I think she went for help and she got basically the same response.
Holy fuck.
So I'm just gonna stop it there. It goes on. It's actually about an hour and a half long podcast, an hour 45 minutes. They really go into kind of the story of, Troy's dad and how it affected his family. But just a couple of things to touch on. Again, after you hear that podcast, is one, what I really like about what Christina and Corinne do in this podcast is there's such a stigma around pedophiles and pedophilic disorders, and how it's so much different than all these mental disorders just because of how kind of corrupt and dark it is. But it's a mental disorder at the end of the day, and this is something that everyone has to deal with. And if you pick and choose which mental disorders you're okay with and which ones you're not okay with, you need to be careful with your bias, because this disorder is really, when you look at it black and white on a piece of paper, is no different than any other disorder that we presented on as a class. It's just, it has it just gives that gut feeling inside people that makes them so angry. And you'll hear Christina throughout the podcast actually lose it a couple times, like she did when he was talking about the counselors and how his family was treated and how his daughter was treated, and you need to cover this up and cover that up. The attention that needs to be there is not there. And even though that this story happened, you know, significantly further back, it's still something that we need to work on as a group. And I think it's definitely a disorder that people should probably think twice about in regards to writing these individuals off and whether or not they can work with them, because in society, this is cyclical. So you'll see these pedophiles were abused as children, they're abusing their children, and chances are that those children might abuse their children. And if we can step in as counselors and therapists and kind of stop the cycle, that's basically what we're here for, right? So something to think about. Again, this podcast is great. I recommend it for multiple things, especially those of you who are thinking about being sex therapists. This is great. Have your clients listen to this. So I wanted to thank everybody. That's it. Does anyone have any questions, any thoughts about this? I'm sure there would be a lot of discussion happening if there was someone in the classroom. So thanks for watching, and that's it.